The way the 2021 season ended for the Los Angeles Chargers was certainly less than ideal. You're in a spot on the one hand that you love to be in. You control your own destiny. You got that last week of the season, that matchup against the Raiders. You either win or you tie, and you're in the playoffs. Like, you've actually got two different options for how you can get into the playoffs. Win or tie, and you're in. And yet, due to some fumbling of game and clock management situations, specifically game management situations, by head coach Brandon Staley, the Chargers found a way to snatch defeat from victory or tie. And as a result, they watched as the Las Vegas Raiders went to the playoffs and the Chargers missed them. So, pain. You talk about a franchise over the years that's felt a bit snake-bitten, and they certainly have. You know, it sucks when you suffer some really self-inflicted wounds. So I was really curious heading into the offseason how the Chargers were going to try and take another step. What were they going to do to wash the taste out of their mouth from last season's disappointing end? Well, they went and traded a second-round pick to the Chicago Bears to bring in Khalil Mack. So now you're talking about you got Bosa on one side, Khalil Mack on the other. It was worth it, you're thinking. Hey, you bring in Mack, you didn't have to give up a first-round pick. You've got a guy that you know can be a higher-end edge rusher. You're bringing him into a situation where he doesn't have to be the dude. Joey Bosa's already there. He's the dude. Khalil Mack could be a high-level number 2. You'll love to see it. They went and signed J.C. Jackson in free agency away from the New England Patriots, so felt they needed some help in the secondary and spent a lot of money to try and get better there. And I guess you could technically say, that the Chargers made some progress in 2022. They didn't make the playoffs the season before, but they did this time. So yeah, in and of itself, that is progress. I mean, isn't it? I would say so. Probably not the progress Chargers fans would have liked to have seen, not where they want to be, but progress nonetheless. And that came with an offense that put up some decent, but I certainly wouldn't say special numbers. Justin Herbert did throw for over 4,700 yards, so it's not exactly chicken feed even in the pass-happy NFL, but it was a step down from the season before for sure, and he only had 25 touchdown passes. So that's not exactly an overwhelming number. Austin Eckler was a great kind of three-down presence again in 2022. He had 18 combined touchdowns, but still fell short of 1,000 yards rushing. You know, part of the problem for the Chargers at times in the passing game was the fact that they didn't have Mike Williams some. He only played 13 games and was out at the end of the year. More on that in a moment. He only got 10 games from Keenan Allen. So while they were third in passing yards, they were also 30th in rushing yards. So this is an offense that still lacked balance. And look, I don't think it's so important to be a great running team in today's NFL. But you probably don't want to be the absolute bottom of the barrel either, because it puts even more pressure on that one dimension that you do a lot and maybe you execute well upon, the passing game. It's nice to have a little bit of a balance, especially when you get into playoffs. More on that in a moment. But the reality is even with the signing of J.C. Jackson, the trade for Khalil Mack, the defense wasn't all that good. They certainly were really, really bad against the run. You know, and for a franchise over the years that has certainly felt snake-bitten, especially when it comes to kind of notable key, marquee injuries to marquee players, important key players, it really sucks. You get a mostly healthy season out of Derwin James, but then you only get 5 games out of Joey Bosa and only 5 games out of a guy you spend a crap ton of money on in free agency and J.C. Jackson to come in and help fix your secondary. These guys that you were counting on weren't there for the majority of the season. So with some respect, you know, you could say, well, every team seems to deal with injuries at some point in time during a season because it's a long season. And that is absolutely true. But it just seems like sometimes the Chargers deal with more key injuries to notable marquee players than most other teams in the league. That could be my perception only and be totally wrong, but it's sure the health feels that way. But when you look at the totality of the season, they won 10 games, made the playoffs, and yet you have to say, coming out of this year, Brandon Staley's seat as the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers is hot. It's got to be really hot. Part of that is due to the decision to allow the starters to not only play in Week 18, a relatively meaningless game against the Denver Broncos, but for some cases, letting them play as long as they did. And one of the things that happened that felt like a bit of coaching incompetence, coaching negligence, coaching malfeasance was throwing Mike Williams out there, who already was a bit banged up, and then he suffers a back injury, so now he's out, and he's out for your wild card round game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not good. So that in and of itself makes you a bit questionable. But then when you look at what happened in that wild card round game on the road against the Jags, Trevor Lawrence had 4 first-half interceptions. The Chargers had them dudes dead to effing rights. And it's funny, even as you were watching the game, you're like, well, if the Jaguars ever stop turning the ball over, they might still be able to come back and make a game out of this, because you just get the sense that the Chargers, as much as you call them the Chargers, you should really call them the chokers. In these big key spots, they find a way to gag it up. And that's certainly what the hell they did in the wild card round, isn't it? They were up 27-0 in the second quarter. And shit, even if you want to go a little bit deeper, even like halfway, a little more than halfway into the third, they were still up 30-14. So they had a 2-touchdown and 2-point conversion lead on the damn Jags and still found a way to cough it up and lose that damn game. And when you look at that team in the second half and the offense's inability to move the ball, the defense's inability to stop the Jags, the Chargers' inability to get some speed on the outside, maybe where somebody like a Mike Williams might have been very helpful, I don't know. The lack of balance in the running game. Like, you look all across the board, there were problems that led to this giant choke job for the chokers. I mean the Chargers. I mean the chokers. It's the same damn difference. And to those that were sitting there trying to just blame Justin Herbert, I'm not trying to totally excuse him either. It's just, it fascinates me how sometimes you have some quarterbacks that fans and media will try to make every fucking excuse in the world why it's not their fault. And then you have other guys that seem to be very easy targets, and Herbert somehow has become a very, very easy target. He's a part of the problem, but he's far from exclusively the only problem in that playoff game, and I can't imagine you watch that game and would think anything else. He's not the one that couldn't run the damn ball. He's not the one that couldn't stop the Jags defensively. And that's what I don't get. So now you come into this offseason, the Chargers with another disappointing finish to the year. Mind you, at least this time it was in the playoffs. What the hell difference does that really make? They're sitting almost $20 million over the salary cap. Got to make big decisions on Khalil Mack and Keenan Allen. At this time, those guys are both still there, but it's potential possibility that one or both may be gone, although I'd lean a little bit more towards they might let Khalil Mack go as opposed to Keenan Allen. How does this team get better? And even with that, you say, how much of it is the Jimmies and Joes, and how much is it the X's and O's and the coaches that run the show? You could always look to upgrade some of the talent on the team. That is true. And they certainly have a need there, especially on the defensive side. And they could use a little more speed at wide receiver. It'd also be help if they could have Rashawn Slater for an entire season. That certainly wouldn't hurt their feelings. But I still wonder how much that really matters if Brandon Staley's in charge. Like, is he going to learn from some of these mistakes of the past couple of seasons? Or is this just kind of his deal, and he's going to be one of the impediments that stops the Chargers from taking that next step forward?